I think we're live. So,
Live.
yeah, we're live. And I think this is episode 13. Is
It
it?
is episode Lucky 13.
Lucky
Or
13. We're
Lucky
making
13.
our own Friday the 13th here, folks.
Oh, it's fabulous. And I am very happy to report that it is raining in Seattle,
Thank
finally.
goodness.
So the air quality, maybe it's not improving, but it kind of feels like it's improving.
Right. So, for those of you who are coming in from all other parts of the nation, the Pacific Northwest has been soaking in a smoke marinade for the last week or so, just sitting in it. So um, we needed that rain.
It's been
It,
pretty gnarly. The
yeah,
rain is so welcome, as is the breeze that it brings with, because I can wear my brand new Jazz Girl sweatshirt, finally, and I'm stoked. And
fantastic.
I am also stoked, and actually, my dog Chachi here is extremely stoked as well. He's joining us because he really loves him some alt strings music.
Yes.
Which is a term that I cannot stand. Maybe people here want to talk about that.
Yes.
Um, I'm gonna turn it over to my like string specialist people, and let's talk shop, y'alls.
Let's talk shop. So I'm gonna introduce our guests, and the cool part about our guests is that they work in both worlds.
Right.
Both of these individuals are brass musicians.
Originally.
Also, yes, but also both of these individuals are experts in folk music and are placing kind of an emphasis on the music of Appalachia, old time bluegrass, and looking at that as it intersects with various things. So let me introduce them one by one. We'll start with Sophia Enriquez. Sophia is a doctoral student at Ohio State University in
The
ethno
Ohio
the
State.
Ohio State University.
Yes, let's not forget the
Yes.
very just
Sorry, I
the
am such a Northwesterner. Oh my goodness. Um, but she is studying for a doctoral degree in ethnomusicology. The focus of her work is that she is looking at Latinx musicians and music making in Appalachia, and also studying the intersection of Latinx music with bluegrass and old time, the music of Appalachia,
That
which
is so
is
cool.
extremely fascinating.
And I know nothing about it. I
Yeah,
cannot wait to learn.
it's so cool, and there's such cool things happening, and we are also joined by the esteemed associate professor of musicology at West Virginia University.
That's a West Virginia university.
Yes, one of them, one of them, and this is Professor Travis Stimeling, and Travis um, is the director of the WVU Bluegrass and Old Time ensembles, and also runs the university's Appalachian music program and Appalachian Studies minor.
That is so
So,
cool. I want that minor.
yes, I know. How cool is that? So we are really excited to have you here because Kelly and I used to run a music program in a very urban part of Seattle. Neither of us work there still, but it remains like a major part of our identity.
The glory years.
The glory years, if you will. But one of the things that we started at the school was, I guess, it was kind of, at least at first, based in Appalachian music, a group that we called the Fiddlers at Washington Middle School. And that group was really involved in fiddle music, bluegrass music, and other styles. So we definitely also moved toward jazz. The school itself was a very jazz focused school. Kelly is a jazz specialist. So the group really, took on styles that were not related at all to Eurocentric art music. And it really kind of transformed those kids. And I mean, even to this day. Also, I am very involved in the greater bluegrass community as the director of education for Wintergrass, which is a large scale festival up here in the Pacific Northwest, and we have a very large education component. And one of the things that we're very interested in at Wintergrass is how do we make our music more culturally responsive? So Kelly and I have been doing some research, and you two came up as people that we need to be talking to about this. So welcome to our show.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
What do y'all want to talk about? What's
Yeah.
your agenda? Talk to me. Why should we be teaching Appalachian music, folk music, American roots music? How, why, who, when? Jump on in.
Sophia, you want to start or should I?
I will start with a preface to mine and Travis's relationship. So we're, good colleagues and also friends, and he has turned out to be one of the best mentors I never really asked for.
Those are the best friends, I think.
Yeah, and so we I was in his music history class as a undergraduate music major at West Virginia University, and also saw the birth of the Bluegrass and Oldtime program at WVU, which I participated in for 2 years.
Okay.
And this involved me walking into his office one day and saying, I think I want to sing bluegrass. And he said, okay, well, sing me something. And I did. And then the rest is history. And I think
so
that...
is that how you got involved? Is that you wanted a place to sing and that felt like the natural spot?
I wanted something different. I wanted a break from the sort of, the Western classical, very strict model of learning. And I had just been exposed to bluegrass just by nature of being in West Virginia and being around a lot of West Virginians who were active in that community. And I just wanted to try. And I didn't really realize until after the fact that actually where I'm from in southwestern Ohio is like bluegrass, like super, super important in the history of bluegrass, and lots of bluegrass action happening close to my hometown. So I wanted just to say that Travis and I have really built a relationship based on vulnerability and open conversations like this one that we're about to have. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to put that out there because for me, that's sort of at the core of how I approach my work as a teacher, but also as a scholar, as a musician, is around this theme of vulnerability and learning. And these are things that we need right now more than ever.
I really love hearing you say that. We've been talking a lot, Beth and I, with our guests over the last few weeks about, why people are maybe avoiding changing their practice at this time that is the golden moment to make those changes, and that it's probably fear-based and also I think an unwillingness to be vulnerable, to not be willing to do that. And I appreciate your pointing out like what a critical component to growth that is.
Yeah, and we talk about vulnerability a lot. We also talk about grace. Those are two themes that come up and that I think probably started somewhere in a hallway at WVU and now have kind of become pervading themes in our regular text messages. But I think that's at the core of learning any form of music, right? You're putting yourself out there, you're taking creative risks, and you're going to make mistakes. And I feel like go ahead and bring bell hooks into the conversation already. I think that the music
Always,
associated
please.
with with dominator culture
Mm-hmm.
is so much about mastery and pointing out your failures to master. And one of the things that we really drive through the Bluegrass program here, the Appalachian music program here, is that we expect you to take creative risks and make lots of mistakes and keep growing, right? And the core of my teaching philosophy is students need to feel three things. They need to feel safe, they need to feel loved, and they need to feel seen. And so that includes in my music history classroom. That goes right into the ensembles that I lead as well. So we've done everything from kind of traditional old time fiddle tunes from Pocahontas County, West Virginia, the Hammonds family tunes and things. We've also done Taylor Swift covers. Why? Because students bring the music that they are interested in, and we work to find ways to use bluegrass and old time idioms to rearrange those songs,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I like to start with where the students are comfortable and then get them to start pushing out a little bit more. And so if that's a pop country song, well, we can work with a pop country song, right? Um, Actually, when Sophia first started, we had a killer Black Sabbath cover in her band.
War
That
pigs.
yeah, you've not heard War Pigs until you've heard it in bluegrass style, and we tore down a place with that one night. That was
I
great.
love
Uh,
the bluegrassification of anything. I'm always like super
Everything.
inspired by
Totally.
that. And I just think it's a beautiful part of that community, this willingness to um, avoid snobbery, maybe. You
Yeah.
know?
yeah,
It's refreshing.
or at least to take some of the snobbery that's associated with Western art music,
Yeah.
and call it for what it is, and
Sure.
recognize that there's also snobbery in vernacular musical traditions.
Mhm.
There is definitely bluegrass snobbery. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. And it's often very heavily rooted in white masculinity. And so, it's worth noting that, it's not all flowers and butterflies.
Mhm.
Um, but I think couched in the right way, and our program is really couched in the context of a jam session. So everybody brings what they can. We learn from each other by watching fingers, by trying out harmonies face to face, and we see what works and what doesn't work. And that's really important. Students drive the program. What they want to work on is what we work on, and that also gives students buy-in, right? And then the last kind of core component of what we do is we work really hard to connect to the people of West Virginia. I teach at a land grant school, which means that we actually exist in part to serve the people of the state of West Virginia. We don't have a budget, but we still see that when we have WVU on our name, we owe that to the taxpayers, the residents of this state. So that means that we do free public school concerts, not to teach people about how great bluegrass music is, but to highlight the fact it's already in their communities. So when we go to a rural school, I do the research to find out who the leading musicians are in that community, and make sure to at least name check them during our concerts, and tell them where they can go to hear this music. That's kind of, for the sake of cultural sustainability as much as anything. And then the other thing we do is we bring in practitioners from our community to help teach us. And actually, if you look over my shoulder, there's a great photograph here of Kathy Mattea, the Grammy Award-winning artist who dropped out of WVU to pursue a career in Nashville, and one of our great traditional singers, Jenny Hawker. Both of them have come back to teach for us on a regular basis, and we're really lucky to have that sort of not only the support but also the accountability to the people who have been upholding these traditions when we're doing this work. So yeah,
I'd be
that's
curious. I don't want to steer the conversation too much, as the non-string person here, especially. But I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you run jam sessions, because I notice in the jazz community that jam sessions do not feel inclusive or like a safe learning environment. They feel like a place where if you don't know certain things, you will be told that you need to go do some more work, and in a not so nice way, and or that you just flat out will be ignored, like vibed, or it doesn't feel like the right spot. And what you've just described, and I assume that Sophia's been to them as well, is a jam session that sounds like what I want to be able to create for jazz students, but I've never really seen one. But I have seen them at Wintergrass. I have seen jam sessions at Wintergrass with students all the way up to, like elders in the community jamming together, and it felt like what I want to see. How do you all create that? How does that work? Because I think our band directors could really learn a lot from that, myself included.
Well, a lot of it starts with pattern recognition, right? On a very purely music pedagogy kind of way. If you know how to play 1, 4, and 5 in G major on a guitar, you've opened up about 50% of the repertoire.
Yep.
Okay?
Yep. Three
Right,
chords of the truth.
3 chords
right,
of the truth all the way.
if you can throw a D shape in there, then you've opened up another 10%. So there is a kind of common vocabulary there, musically speaking.
Right.
I also teach students to use the Nashville number system, which is a form of notation developed in the Nashville studio system back in the 1950s to offer shorthand for how the harmonies work in a tune. And so we'll shout out, this is this one it goes 1141, 1151, 1141, 1151,
Okay.
and watch me for the changes. Because if it's got a squirrely, half bar or something in there, watch me for the changes, catch it on the second verse. Right.
Right.
And so it's just about like connecting eyes to fingers and ears. It's all just kind of learning while you're doing
right.
there.
I wonder if
Go
one
ahead.
of the reasons that doesn't work so well in band circles is because your mouth is busy while you're playing. Like rhythm section players can operate in that manner, but it would be very hard for me to play trombone and also be yelling out information. But it seems like that could be very easily avoided by just a little short pre-teach or putting something on the board or something like that.
Yeah, and honestly, if you're using like a blues progression or something like that, fingers.
Sure.
I do that. I flash fingers during rehearsal to get people. If I notice that there are a couple of people who aren't catching, but I don't want to stop the band, I'll just throw fingers up and they'll get back on. Yeah.
Right. There's something more though. It's not. It feels like a cultural value system that's different, and I'd like to understand more about it so I can try and advocate for those things in the jazz world.
Well, one thing I'd like to know, maybe from Sophia, I'd love to hear your story of like entering into, say, a bluegrass jam for the first time. Because I have a story that I want to tell, but I want to hear yours first. Because Kelly, there are rules that you can break. I know because I've done it.
Right.
Sophia, I'd love to hear your story.
Yeah, so I guess a distinction that is relevant in some ways, especially for folks who are coming at this from or already have exposure experience in bluegrass and old time spaces. Those are two very different things when it comes to the jam. Mm-hmm. In the Appalachian music community more broadly, the old time jam has a reputation of being much more welcoming and much more inviting and accepting. Okay. That's not just my own experience, but that's something that I often hear from folks, specifically women. There is a musical component in that a lot of the old time repertoire is predictable, right? Not that bluegrass isn't also predictable, but there is sort of what's the word I'm looking for?
There's a simple format. The format is.
There's the question of complexity, and you are more likely to encounter a song that maybe requires a different skill level, like in a bluegrass jam. That's been my experience. So there's also the question of singing, right? A lot of old time jams, they may or may not have singing. So I would say that given that I do have more experience in bluegrass communities, so I've done a lot of just like what we call in ethnographic research participant observation, showing up to a festival, starting up a conversation, making some sort of in to then sort of work my way into the periphery of the jam and eventually like in the actual jam. And that's usually me playing guitar. And I don't play big fancy solos. I can play a really steady, strong rhythm guitar, and that's all I need to do. And I will sing if it's appropriate or there's an opportunity. But my experience, especially as a young woman, entering into mostly like white, older male dominant spaces has been a lot. Like it's been
Word.
Talk about it. Talk about it.
yeah. So it's been a lot in that there's of course there's the power dynamic, right? There's the genderedness, there's the oftentimes there's a sexual tension. Um, there's a and that comes also with the repertoire, which we can talk about too, right? And the way that women are often sexualized or objectified in different ways
Within
through.
the lyrics.
Yeah. And then I think it's just I've been told, "Oh, we cannot possibly play that song in that key. You're gonna have to sing it somewhere else. Um, that's too sissy." Like, I've heard it all, in terms of just like genderness, uh, assumptions about women not being competent musicians, or yeah. So there is the whole, I would say that my experience has very much been characterized by those gender problems that we have in these spaces. But I also I've kind of reached a point where I don't care, but I do sort of, for me, there's a politics about my own decision about which spaces I choose to enter into or not to.
Right.
And that comes from just this idea of like, well, how does one like get started at a jam? For me, it's like I need to be in a position to observe first, to know, is this a space where I'm going to be welcomed? And if not, what's that going to look like for me? Is it worth it? So these are all sort of things that I have to think through, that I think, the like I guess a straight like white dude would not need to think about. Or, there might be social anxiety, but it's not anxiety because they don't look the same, or they don't identify the same way.
Right.
So yeah, I would say that, and that has definitely had a hand in the sort of critical frameworks and lenses that I use in my research and my own pedagogy, because I am coming at it from that experience. And I suppose that this is also backing up to that idea of vulnerability. And I think, Kelly, you were talking about like what what your students bring into when you're talking about learning a new music or whatever. And I think like, okay, what do I bring to this music? How do I identify it? Where do I see myself or not see myself in it?
Right.
So I think that being the like broad other in a bluegrass song or in bluegrass music in general, those questions are always sort of churning about where not, you do or don't see yourself represented.
Right.
So that's, I guess, been my experience vaguely. And I would be interested for sure to hear more about like, I don't have experience in jazz circles. I was never like big into jazz trumpet.
No, jazz jam sessions have a real formula. There's a rhythm section. Sometimes it's a house band where, people might cycle in and out, but a set group, but not always. And then there's often someone who is calling charts or inviting people up. But, there's usually like 2 to 4 horn players. You play the melody a couple of times. and then you know, people improvise solos. Sometimes you're improvising backgrounds. There might be trading fours or trading twos, you know, this type of thing. But it's pretty formulaic. But I feel like, it, it's uh, it's always very. It feels very like it's still a performance.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I was gonna say it's performative. Like most of the
Performative.
jazz jams I see they take place on a stage,
That's right.
as opposed to like a bluegrass jam or an old time jam where there are elements of being performative, of course, but mostly it's set up in a circle.
Circle. I think that's a huge part of what might make it feel more like a community.
Right.
If you're facing each other, not an audience.
Hmm.
And I also wonder about, and I also think there's something about the all play format that's much more welcoming, because you can barely be hanging on to the basic chord changes and still participate. Whereas at a jazz jam session, I have never seen a time where there would be 4 guitarists or maybe 10 horn players. And so then feel isolated and kind of called out. And now you're on stage and it's in front of people. And so even the most like chill, loosey-goosey jams, they still feel uptight. And I've tried to speak to folks about how I think that is really keeping out a huge number of folks, because not only do you have to get over all of the things that Sophia was just describing, but then you have to do it up on stage in front of an audience and everyone else who's waiting for their turn to play, instead of everyone playing the whole time.
Yeah.
And I really would like to move jazz jam sessions in that direction. And I know that I will be met with like probably an insurmountable amount of backlash, because it's not the tradition. But I feel really strongly that it's one of those places where we can really show that the tradition is not working for a very large number of people who do want to participate. It's just not safe for them to do so in that manner. But I think, yes, that it's in a circle and that it's not performative and that it's an all play. I think those are the things that are really working well. But I am really also curious to know about the things that aren't working well.
So Kelly,
if I could, I would just add in that there's in our program here at West Virginia, I do make some distinctions about who gets to do all play and who gets to do more kind of band-oriented work. And bluegrass is traditionally a band-oriented music. It was a commercial form of country music. It still is. It has the trade organization, the International Bluegrass Music Association. It has its own radio airplay charts. It's a band-oriented music. Old-time music is very much still grounded in the vernacular. Sure, there are recording stars, but it's kept up, by local community people. Around here, it seems like literally every little burg has a fiddler or a banjo player, and that's no exaggeration. But it's community oriented. And so our old time jam is a place where we get to know each other and do kind of sociality work so that everybody plays there. But then my beginning and intermediate students often stay in that jam to learn. And the more advanced students, maybe students who come with years of playing bluegrass music, they get put into a different group that's the group we actually tour out with. They're capable of putting together a 45 or 50-minute show in about 6 weeks, and then we hit the road with them. And I've noticed, too, the dynamics between the touring group and the jam group sometimes it's radically different for me to walk from one to the other. And also from a logistical standpoint, I know we're talking primarily to a teaching audience here. I don't get paid to do any of this work. It's a 1-credit course that I do as a bonus to my load. And so I'm a music historian. I do musicology courses, and this is a thing I do out of passion. At one point in time, it's really a passion project. At one point in time, though, I had 3 different groups that were working simultaneously at different levels, and was teaching all three of them in a single hour. Okay, so I would go from one room to another room to another room and offer coachings, and then I would have to trade. I basically would assign a band leader and say, "You're in charge here. You're in charge here. You're in charge here. Come back and talk to me about what you actually did," and I'll offer feedback there. But from a purely logistical standpoint, again, we're talking about like ceding that power back over. Um, it's a deliberate. I mean, it's a pedagogical necessity for me, but it also helps to show that there's a little bit of everybody has to buy in order to be part of that. And
Right.
so, yeah, just I wanted to add that as another thing. But I do think that you're right. The all play factor in particularly old time music, or if you get them started on gospel songs. Gospel songs are great, right? Like everybody, regardless of religious faith, it seems can catch at least one verse and chorus of "I'll Fly Away," or "Will the Circle Be
People
Unbroken."
good to be in it.
Yeah, and
Really
so and so we start with stuff like that, and then let them go from there. You can teach so much great music making with
Mm.
kind of common practice, American hymnody, and gospel songs that everybody. It seems like everybody can catch on. And we've been doing this what 7 years now. We've had students from various places in the U.S., but we've also had students from Brazil. We've had students from Indonesia. We've had students who didn't grow up in American vernacular music necessarily, who've been able to find a place within these musics by participating in that all play format. So I think you're onto something, Kelly, with that.
So
And for jazz, like what about New Orleans jazz, right? Like New Orleans jazz, or what we used to, what some people call Dixieland, is everybody playing at the
A
same time.
second line is definitely like a core group, but then picking up everyone along the way. It's an all play, and it's
join in.
sense.
That's right. That's right.
So I want to like pose this to all the people here. So Kelly, my very first experience with jamming
Yeah.
in a bluegrass community was a real eye opener. Let's just say. Okay, so I'm a pretty forward, hard-headed woman who doesn't usually. I guess I will walk into situations sometimes where I don't have any business doing that. So I was a college kid. I was at my first bluegrass festival.
Yeah.
I was starting to get into bluegrass, but also a classical music major, music ed. And I was at this festival, hippie dress, barefoot, this kind of thing.
I love thinking about you that way because
Yeah.
I have never known that Beth with a hippie dress and bare feet.
Okay, well, I was.
Hilarious. I know, and I've seen pictures.
And so what I did was I traipsed over with my violin case over to a group of gentlemen who were, middle to older aged. And I thought to myself, these look like nice people. I think I'll jam with them. So I got out my instrument.
For Kosh.
Got out my instrument. Travis sees where this is going. Got out my instrument and started jamming. I thought that's what was going on.
What we're doing.
So, right. So what happened was the kind gentleman on my left who was playing a guitar and the kind gentleman on my right who was playing a banjo took one step forward and then they took one step together. There I was with my fiddle.
That was like they offed you with their bodies.
So it was at that moment in time where I realized that there is an etiquette to this. And I made it my mission when I started teaching kids bluegrass music that they need to know these unspoken rules.
Right. Right.
So,
Now, okay, that is hilarious, but also I think like super important to talk about. Like
right,
every genre of music has its rules, its etiquette, its no can do's.
right,
But who teaches those to students
right,
and how and when? I think that's maybe where the misfire comes, because I
right.
would argue that a college violinist should have been taught that at some point in their career by a private teacher, a school teacher, or somebody. Like that shouldn't have even been something that happened. And I wonder about, here's what I wonder. Are we not teaching those rules to students because we want to gatekeep something that we find to be ours? I want it to be mine. And unless you go through these hoops and jump these hurdles and do these things, you won't have like proved yourself. It always feels uh icky to me, instead of just explaining the rules. I don't know. Can somebody talk about that?
Yeah, please.
It
Well,
feels
well,
like
Talk about it.
gatekeeping to me.
my
But I could be
my
wrong.
thought on that, my thought on that though is that there are jerks that we don't need to tolerate, right?
Right.
Like we shouldn't tolerate jerk behavior at any point. And so, like the way I run my program is very hippy dippy, right? It is actually it is the opposite of how I was raised up in kind of adjacent to this music. I did bluegrass gospel music as a kid with my mom. We played around local churches about an hour south of where I am right now. And there is a lot of kind of crappy hyper masculine BS as we've already talked about there. And I
I
was a
don't
sensitive.
picture two women doing that.
No.
It's worth.
No, but and you know, and as a sensitive kid who took that stuff very seriously, like it hurt me in ways too, right?
Yeah.
So part of my pedagogy is working to build a better bluegrass,
Mm-hmm.
right? To not change the music, right, and to not change kind of what are the most essential parts of that culture and being respectful of it. But I think that there is value in teaching kids that that sort of behavior is intolerable any place, right? That again, remember what I said, my teaching philosophy is about making sure students feel safe, loved, and seen. And that's in my classroom and that's in the community when they go out to play. And so I'll warn students if they start playing with, if they want to go to a jam session that I know isn't hostile or is hostile to newcomers, I'll be darn sure to tell them, right? Like that's not a jam session you want to go to right now because you won't feel safe, loved, and seen, right? There are musicians in our community who I will make darn sure that women don't go play with because I know their reputations, right? And I will
Yeah.
encourage men to not play with them either so that we
Well,
can kind
that's
of cut
really
that
important
out, right?
ally work, Travis.
Yeah,
Thank you
well,
so
but
much.
I just think it's necessary, right? Because bluegrass music, and really any of our American vernacular traditions they have so much power to really revolutionize the world that our kids are going to be in, right? To teach them revolutionary power. But if we teach them that they have to put up with the BS the gatekeepers put up in front of them,
Yeah.
alongside that, then we're undercutting our message, right? So for me, it's about as and I make mistakes too, for sure. There have been times where you know I haven't been the ally that I wanted to be,
We've all done
but
harm.
right, but you know what? I think that there's value in just saying if your applied teacher is treating you that way, that's unacceptable. If these guys at our local music festival are treating you that way, that's unacceptable. You deserve to be treated with dignity, and this music can be welcoming to you if you find the right people to play with.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think that idea of like that statement, building a better bluegrass, is beautiful. And it sounds like something that Sophia is very focused on. And
Yes.
I'd love to talk about that concept a little bit more, because I can see real value, not just there, but we need to build a better jazz community. And if you want to continue teaching exclusively Western art music to your students, you're really going to need to build a better culture there.
Yes.
I mean, just toxic behavior
Lots of work to be
cannot
done.
be accepted in any genre. Anyway, Sophia, go ahead.
The word that's been coming up in a lot of conversations lately has been this idea of unlearning and what that looks like, and how we learn unlearning, because this is a concept that is very uncomfortable for a lot of folks. I've sort of observed, so I studied education. I've been educated in a variety of contexts. Um, I I grew up showing cattle and goats in 4-H, and have just often been in non-school based educational settings too,
Right.
like agriculture, livestock, these sorts of things. You know, informal music making outside of school. And I sort of observed or sort of come to this idea of like, we either, as teachers, we either teach our students by way of doing that your learning ends with your formal education, or that it begins there and keeps going. And so I find that even a lot of conversations that I try to have with good friends and family members, it's a being taught that you've arrived at life, you've arrived at whatever set of beliefs or ideologies.
Sorry that I'm laughing. This has reminded me of one of like the most hilarious teaching speeches I've ever given, which I'll have Beth tell in a minute. But okay,
yeah, go ahead.
I was not laughing it.
So there's this arrival pedagogy that I think a lot of teachers are actually trained into, right? You model by you're the expert, you're the master of all knowledge, and you're right. And even if it's not quite as firm, that's often that's what a lot of teachers put out, right? But that there's this other model which is vulnerable, which is extremely reflective, which is more work. And that is the one where you mess up in front of your students and you don't know in front of your students, and you show them that you're learning too. So they're not learning they're not done learning when they leave their classroom, when they graduate from that school, when they go to college, and when they're done and when they get the job. Like, it never stops. And so I feel I'm very grateful that I've been exposed to, that latter model, that very, I think that's what's necessary to move us forward in this moment. Is for, and we reach, especially, an example, right? So in the Columbus, where I'm at, out of Columbus, Ohio, Columbus Public Schools, we have a really quickly, rapidly growing Latino student population here. And this past year, I volunteered a little bit as an interpreter for parent-teacher conferences, and we are also arriving at this a generational cultural gap in the way that teachers are being trained from predominantly white higher education institutions, and then what their like local on-the-ground community actually looks like. Right. And are they culturally competent? Do they have the knowledge to provide resources to the parents of students or the students themselves who need it? A lot of times the answer here is no.
I think that's pretty universally true.
Yeah. So I think that, taking something like music, or thinking about, okay, well, Travis and I have written about this recently, the jam, or the idea of the circle that we've been talking about as a pedagogic tool, that's like a way to start a lot of other conversations about equity, about access, all of these things. And the one thing along those lines that Beth, your sort of anecdote made me think of is that's the sort of paradox of the circle, right? Is that it is inclusive, it is all play, but there's always someone outside of the circle. There will always be the periphery.
We have to look at who those people are.
Yeah. Well, and in the case of a music education or a music classroom, say in a public school, the people outside of that circle are the people who don't even darken the door of the band room or the orchestra room. They don't even consider signing up for our program. And we don't have a program that fits these people. And they are our students who are not being served. And
Yeah, we're doing something here at West Virginia this semester in response to COVID that
Oh.
I think offers a model for how to get those students in, because I'm with you. Those are the students that I stay up at night worrying about, like
Mhm.
who do I not get to see, because you might not get to see them. I get to see even fewer of them as a member of a music faculty, right?
Sure.
Um, and I think what we're doing is, because we can't have orchestra and band and choir in the same ways we normally have them,
Right.
we're allowing students the option, one, to select whatever ensemble they want to do. So they can do orchestra, but it's string only and they don't have to participate. And then they can join this course that is basically creative music exploration. Now,
That's cool.
this is for music majors, right? But it's for students who maybe want to expand in some way. And I can see where a class that was open in that sense, right, in a middle school, that says, you know, we're going to have the tools you need to make music here, but you bring your interests and I'll help you reverse engineer it. I'll help you learn, right? So there you're again the facilitator and not the person on the podium.
Travis,
I
I'm
think there's
basically
power there.
advocating that everyone do that right now
I mean, that
for
is
all
like,
of their classes.
honestly,
Honestly.
this is like what it's all about. Seriously, like this is a blessing of COVID.
Yes.
This is a blessing of COVID. Like, we have a chance to actually start engineering this.
To actually serve our students.
Yeah.
And maybe find students who have avoided our classrooms because they have not felt safe or loved or seen. That's a lot of kids.
It is, and I always hate it when a student, somebody comes up to me and says, well, I couldn't do this. I'm not musical. Well, that's a message they learned probably in 7th grade,
Yeah.
right? When they
Earlier,
decided,
Oh,
I'd
totally.
say.
right?
Earlier.
They decided they didn't want to be in band, and so now all that's left is music appreciation, however that's manifested, right? And I listen to the radio, and that's it. Everybody can sing.
Yes.
Everybody can sing, right? It doesn't. I'm not a Christian person, but I do believe that the Lord likes it when we make a joyful noise,
Sure.
and so whatever that joyful noise is, I want to hear that. And there's a student in my program now who I've been lucky to have for like 4 different degrees. She stayed on for a couple of master's degrees, and she started out kind of a wobbly singer, but she was a passionate singer, and now she sang last week. She might even be tuned in now. She just knocked it out of the park. In tune, in time, like really just solid work. And it started because it was like, I want to hear you sing. You want to sing? I want to hear you sing, right? It wasn't about saying, well, you don't sing good enough to be in this group, right? Get out of here. It was just, you want to sing? Let me work with what you got. And now, holy moly, watch out, world. It's really powerful.
Made me think of this a friend of Beth and mine, Robin Holcomb, who is a really great pianist and vocalist and composer in Seattle. But she was also like the best chaperone I ever had for my kids, and and just a really kind, thoughtful, gentle person, and was just perfect as a chaperone. It was unbelievable. Anyway, at middle school jazz festivals, there's a lot of things going on that I don't really want to listen to. It's kind of painful. And I get sort of worked up, like how did you even? I get judgmental. Like, how was this even allowed to happen? Why did you pick this song? Of all the songs in the whole world, why this one? Or like, please just play C Jam Blues instead, and let's just learn how to articulate in the jazz style. Like, I get really worked up about these things, and I would observe Robin sitting in the audience just absolutely smiling and bobbing her head and snapping, and I finally, after a while, like several of these things, asked her what was going on with her that she was able to sit and enjoy this absolute like disaster that was going on. And she said to me that it was just so charming that all of these kids wanted to engage in music, and she just thought it was so beautiful, and that changed my thinking forever. It really did. It is beautiful. Of course we want all these kids engaged. My problem is with the teacher not being properly trained and what choices to make. And that's why I've got a mission to help folks learn how to teach jazz.
Well, Kelly, I'm gonna, as I usually do on these episodes, I'm gonna tie some threads between, previous episodes and previous guests. And what really gets me is that these two guests are echoing things that a lot of other guests have brought up. Things like community involvement is super important.
Right.
Things like student voice is making a person feel seen and heard, and allowing the student to have a voice in what's going on is super important.
Also themes like we're all singers here.
Yeah, everybody sings. Everybody can sing. So I am really glad that these two guests are also on the same page with that. It's driving home some of these ideas that we have for transforming music ed.
And I think more than anything, what Sophia was saying, vulnerability,
Mm-hmm.
that is, we as music teachers ask our students to be vulnerable every single day.
Yeah.
And yet we are unwilling to be vulnerable ourselves. And like Jessica said 2 weeks ago, that really makes you kind of a liar. And it makes kids, to use her words, feel betrayed. You asked me to do this thing. I put myself out there for you, and but you're not willing to do that also. It's a real, I think, misstep in our field. This need to know everything and to be all the time.
And if I could claim Jessica, I will. Because Jessica was my honors thesis student for 2 years back at Millikan University in Illinois, and she came to me and said, "I want to do a project that is meaningful to me and to my family history." And I said, "Well, I know nothing about Filipino folk music, but I bet you can teach me."
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't know if that was a transformative thing, but I know that she gave me the opportunity to be vulnerable in that way, and I carry the lessons that I learned from her with me in my teaching every day. And it's not just about music, but it's about risk taking, and it's about the value of learning your own family roots in a school where maybe your family roots are deliberately, you maybe where you don't present them deliberately because what's going on, your life might not be valued in the same way. And I appreciate what she taught me in that work, and I'm so glad to see that she's thriving there. That just makes me happy too.
And I'm also just reporting that she is watching and commenting currently.
Hey, Sophia perked up when you said that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would also just say that I think Travis has in turn taught that to me, or given me those opportunities, right? To take risks, to experiment, right? I did not grow up immersed in Appalachian music, but I have a lot of very strong family connections to what Appalachia, that's already, there's a lot of conversations about that, but to find, I guess, my relationship with Travis and the model of bluegrass learning that I was exposed to as expansive and inclusive and experimental and risk-taking let me go there when it came to, okay, well, my dissertation research started as looking at women in bluegrass, right? I interviewed a lot of women musicians and took in their stories, and I realized these resonate with me, but there's something missing, right? And the missing part was that I'm mixed Mexican, Anglo, Appalachian, and I found Mexalachian music and I found Latin grass, and it's not mine, but I was able to make those connections, right, and start to build these communities, and that led to this like really rich rich history. It's there's a lot of stuff going on, and that I would say to anyone listening or who might listen to this, that's like, well, Appalachian music, you know, what does that have to do with me, or how could I go there? It's that it does, like, I'm an example, right? Like there are the tools there to show you the narratives that aren't just the what you might think of when you think of Appalachia or a banjo, right? Like,
Right.
because the banjo in itself is its whole other episode, and you know
Totally.
that history.
Yeah.
But I would just say that that is the sort of Appalachian music that I see now in its current form, one that is expanding in all of these different directions, and it's really exciting. And I think if teachers could tap into that, that's really amazing, because there is something for your students no matter where they come from. Because there is Appalachian music, there is probably Chinese Appalachian music, you know, there these connections, or you know, these surprising connections really, I would say, aren't so surprising when we actually like take a moment to think about, well, what are the histories in all of these songs? It's people leaving home, right? It's people picking up and moving. It's also people staying. It's there's a lot in terms of relationship to place and to land, and to the way that cultures have interacted in a place of the country that has given us so much rich music. So I would just say that, in terms of, allowing your sort of entry into, or my entry into bluegrass in this case, to take me home, that was really powerful, because it's not that I saw myself in the way I started, but I got there.
Yeah.
And that, and so thank you, Travis, for always for watching my my little Appalachian world unfold in front of me.
Well, it's so cool.
And thank you for
know.
always holding me to standards.
That's important.
Thanks for making sure that I do better.
Yeah, both sides.
Well, you know, you make like this kind of point that, you know, in Appalachian music, we spend a lot of time telling old stories of the songs that we sing and play, that tell, you know, old stories, but we've got a story that is being written right now. And it's with all of the people who are here now, coming from all kinds of different places and are here now, and this is our home now, and like we need to honor that story that's happening right this second, and include the people that are here right this second, you know.
Well, it makes me feel like making a very bold statement at this time. Maybe to wrap up with a little commentary. I feel like, listen, I'm not really very patriotic, but I do believe that what makes me proud to be an American, what makes me proud is that this country is supposed to be, at least, a place that is welcoming for whoever wants to be here, and that the bringing together of different cultures to be the American experience is what I find truly beautiful. And I feel like musics that are based in this idea of bringing from wherever a person was from before and making something new is really like what a lot of Americans value, and I myself value. Jazz is that. And I also think that what you're describing is in a lot of ways Appalachian music. And so, you know, a lot of teachers want like an answer right now for what we should be doing. And I feel like if you choose any old type of American roots music, whether it's old time old time Appalachian, jazz,
Blues.
gospel, blues. If you choose any of those things, you're not only going to be able to teach um, all of the music fundamentals and skills that you want to teach, but you'll also be able to get at student voice. You'll also be able to get at improvisation. You will also be able to dig into history in a much more interesting way.
Storytelling.
Storytelling, it's not just European history. You're actually, if you go that route, able to teach very progressive, forward thinking. It doesn't matter who you are or what you're from, what you have to bring is what we want. And I feel like I want to see that in every classroom. I think that's where it should be at as far as music education moving forward at this time.
And we have this chance right now since everything is different because of COVID. We have this chance to like do that. We got to act.
Yeah. I mean, you're all my accountability partners right now. Was that
Yes.
a really crazy statement?
I don't think so at all.
I feel it in my heart to be true.
I think you're right on, and I think right now we're in a not only because of COVID, we're in a unique situation for lots of reasons.
Yeah.
But one of them is that we get to look into our kids' rooms, into their homes.
Mhm.
When I started kindergarten back in the mid '80s, the kindergarten teacher actually showed up at our house before we started. They would do a home visit and check
Yeah.
out, like, how are you, how are your living situations? Do you have a bathroom that works? Things like that. We're seeing that now. We're seeing how our kids live in ways that we've not had the opportunity to do for those of us who are working in a virtual situation. And I think, if anything, for me, it's not about what do I teach, what's the thing, but it's more what's the question. And it's what are my kids able to bring, and how can I support that?
Yeah, like let's
Right?
see ourselves as makers of connections, facilitators. Let's see ourselves as meters of needs. We are teaching individuals here. Like we are here to serve individual students. And this COVID thing is making that more and more clear to me every day.
And I would add that, well, one of the things that I emphasize, so I'm teaching a upper level undergraduate class called Music on the Move in a Globalized World. And I've been very clear, given the circumstances, that the goal of this class is not to make your life harder, right?
Mhm.
But I think that we have the power right now as just educators, whether that's in a K-12 setting or not, to give students the tools they need to make sense of this world that they're currently living in.
Right.
Like, that's what we should be doing. We
Yeah.
should be making it make sense for them, to help them process what's going on. So that looks different for me. I'm not interested in a 50 question multiple choice final exam, because
No.
that's not serving the reality of the situation and the critical necessity to reflect and to process and to feel some sense of groundedness in what we're learning and talking about. So I think that that's really important to think through too, is that how is your material, if we even want to call it that, your pedagogy, how are you giving opportunities to your students to process and to grow, to feel okay right now. So
To feel okay and then maybe ultimately feel empowered to make music outside of the confines of our classroom walls.
Snaps, dude.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that is a nice little bow on the end of the episode.
Yes, it is.
So what we're gonna do now is say goodbye to Facebook Live, and we're gonna boop on in new people to the Zoom call for their teacher talk / clock hours. Goodbye, Facebook land.
Thank you.